I'd like to tell you a story. It's a story that can trace its origins back to a Toyota car factory in Toyota City in Japan in the 1950s. And our tale centers around an engineer named Taiichi Ohno. He's remembered as the man who shaped Toyota's production system. Now, as in all factories, there was a constant pursuit of ever greater efficiency at this particular Toyota factory, and that was a problem. You see, efficiency and output climbed higher every single day. But mistakes piled up too, with minor defects snowballing into costly recalls. Now, the workers noticed these issues, but stopping the production line was unthinkable. And yet, good old Taiichi Ohno spotted a solution to these growing problems. And that solution, surprisingly enough, was the workers themselves. He proposed a simple solution, a solution he called the Andon Cord. Any worker at any time could pull that cord and halt the entire line to fix an issue or a defect on the spot, rather than allowing it to progress down the production line. Now, not surprisingly, other managers at Toyota pictured chaos, delays, and even a loss of production. But Taiichi Ohno stood firm, convincing them to give it a shot. And the results were significant. Defects shrank, productivity climbed, and most issues were resolved right there on the line. The Andon Cord worked. It didn't just change Toyota, it changed manufacturing around the world. The success of the Andon Cord was due not to technology, but rather the culture of ownership that it fostered. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking one of three things. Well, one, how is this master storyteller going to conclude this fascinating yet fairly random tale? Number two, what has all this got to do with demolition and construction? Or number three, doesn't this bloke go on? But stick with me. I know precisely where I'm going with this, and I am just kind of taking you via the scenic route. Successful though the Andon Cord concept was in the sphere of manufacturing, then later in software development, healthcare, and customer service, it would not and could not work in the UK demolition and construction sector, even though the industry is plagued with defects that costed upwards of £20 billion every single year in reworks. And there are three key reasons why this approach would never work in our business. The first of those reasons is time. All modern demolition and construction projects are carried out against the clock. They're condensed into a time frame that makes no allowance for any slippage whatsoever. Projects that start late are still expected to hit the agreed deadline. Projects that are impacted by weather are still expected to conclude on or before the agreed date. Material delays, floods, plagues of locusts, and acts of God are no excuse. We agreed a deadline, and by Christ, we're going to hit it. Anyone even proposing the pulling of a modern day Andon cord would likely find themselves hung from it. The second reason that this approach will never catch on in the demolition and construction industry is that this sector operates entirely on a top down management basis. Even though many of those that sit atop the industry bypass the site phase of their learning, opting instead to get their industry knowledge from textbooks and classrooms, they have an unwavering belief that their way is the right way. Even when they're presented with evidence and proof that things are going awry, they will march on doing precisely what they were doing before because the textbook says so. The third and final, and maybe the biggest reason why the Andon Cord principle would never work in the demolition and construction industry is empowerment, or rather, the lack thereof. Those men and women that work on site might have decades of hands on experience. They might have identified problems on previous sites and would be only too willing to share their insights into how such issues, defects, and hazards should be resolved. They're practical people too, able to adapt and overcome. The ability to find a solution or a workaround is hot wired into their very DNA. Yet for all of that, they're ignored. They may well have a solution that could save time, save money, or even save lives. But if they've got dirt under their fingernails or on their boots, their insights are ignored, dismissed, or in some instances, viewed as incendiary, as troublemaking, rabble rousing, or just plain disruptive. Rather than listening to those with hands on experience and time served knowledge and potentially saving themselves some of that £21 billion that's currently being pissed up the wall each year in reworks, the industry marches on in its never ending pursuit of that all important deadline. Regardless of dangers and hazards, faults and defects, no one pulls the Andon cord. Because in this industry, No one would dare